The year is 1943. Europe is suffocating under the iron fist of the Third Reich. While the vast industrial might of the United States begins to tilt the scales, the true battle for the continent is being fought in silence, in the shadows, and over the precarious radio waves high above the French countryside. This is not a war measured in tank divisions or bomber fleets, but in kilograms of plastic explosive, lines of coded text, and the sheer, unyielding courage of individuals. Our story begins not with the roar of a Merlin engine, but with the quiet, desperate scratching of a pen on cheap wartime paper, a pen guided by fear and a terrifying miscalculation. The stakes were astronomical. Across the channel, in the inconspicuous country houses of the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, hundreds of agents, known colloquially as Churchill's Secret Army, were meticulously preparing for the eventual invasion. Their mandate was simple, yet deadly: to set Europe ablaze. And this required an intricate web of logistics, a system where technical failure meant torture and death. The supply chain depended on the technical marvels of the day. Modified four-engine heavy bombers like the Handley Page Halifax, stripped of internal armaments to carry heavy canisters, their flight paths dictated by the fickle moonlight and the precise coordination of MI9 intelligence. The air crews, flying at minimal altitude, often below 1,000 feet to evade German night fighters and radar, performed a deadly dance. Their cargo was lifeblood: Sten guns, collapsible wireless sets, the iconic suitcase radios like the B-2 or the slightly bulkier Mark II, and, most crucially, the detonators and timed pencils necessary to sever the German industrial nerve system. The enemy, however, was technologically formidable. Germany's dominance in electronics was personified by the Funkabwehr, the counterintelligence arm dedicated to hunting down illegal radio transmissions. Their primary weapon was the goniometer, a sophisticated radio direction-finding apparatus mounted on massive, black Mercedes trucks. These trucks, moving silently through the night, could triangulate a clandestine radio signal, known as a pipsqueak, in minutes. An agent transmitting for more than 20 minutes was considered dead. This technological cat-and-mouse game determined life and death. The SOE's response was the development of the high-speed burst transmission, reducing contact time to under 10 seconds, a technical requirement that pushed the limits of the operator's mental and physical endurance. The operator, often working in a frigid attic with the distinct smell of wet stone and old wood, knew that the faint crackle of their equipment was a siren call for the Gestapo. This environment of extreme technological and strategic tension is the stage for our inadvertent protagonist, Marie Dupont, a mother living in the industrial heartland near Le Creusot, a town famous for its vast Schneider arms factory, a prime target for both Allied bombers and SOE saboteurs. Marie's husband, a foreman at the plant, had vanished, taken by the Germans for suspected sabotage. Desperate, and knowing of whispered channels to the Anglais, she was given an old, half-used address book. In a moment of sheer panic, confusion, and illiteracy in the English language, she wrote a heartfelt, detailed plea for help, mistaking a British soldier's innocuous pre-war barracks mailing address for a secret SOE drop site coordinator. She meticulously listed the movements of a local German detachment, detailed the lack of anti-aircraft defenses at a nearby railway bridge, and described the routine of the guards at the factory gate. Information of immense strategic value, encased in a fragile envelope and sent via the slow, unreliable but still functioning neutral country postal service. What Marie could not know was the sheer audacity of her error, an error that instantly elevated her letter from a personal tragedy to a strategic bombshell. She had written to a Royal Artillery gunner, Private Thomas Redding, currently stationed not in an intelligence bunker, but manning an anti-aircraft Bofors gun on the cliffs of Dover. The letter, passing through wartime censorship, a massive bureaucratic machine processing millions of letters weekly, designed primarily to check morale and expose defeatism, was flagged not for its danger, but for its sheer incomprehensibility. A letter written in heavily accented French, detailing German troop movements, addressed to a British private, and posted from occupied territory. The censors, trained to spot the coded language of V-2 rocket trials or the casual leakage of fleet movements, were momentarily baffled. The irony was devastating. The intricate system of wireless codes, microdots, and encrypted messages had been circumvented by the oldest technology in the world, a handwritten letter. The seemingly simple mistake set off a chain reaction that would either doom or save one of the most vital resistance networks in France. This story of accidental heroes and high-stakes strategy is just beginning. Subscribe and click the notification bell to join us as we uncover how the vast logistical machine of the SOE was momentarily paralyzed by one desperate mother's mistake. The letter, stained with French coffee and the grime of the wartime mail service, did not follow the clandestine routes of espionage. It followed the mundane, yet rigid channels of the British General Post Office, landing first on the desk of a censor at the M section in London, a place where boredom often mingled dangerously with national security. The censor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Agnes Pringle, was initially poised to file it under curious, irrelevant foreign correspondence. But the details, however crudely delivered, were too specific to ignore. The mention of the Schneider Works, a site of repeated and costly bombing raids by the heavy Lancasters of Bomber Command, triggered a low-level alert. This simple piece of paper, containing information that could have been broadcast in 10 seconds by a trained radio operator, now sat at the epicenter of a massive bureaucratic struggle between three competing and often antagonistic intelligence agencies. On one side was MI6, focused on grand strategic intelligence, primarily interested in high-grade military secrets, the movement of entire divisions, the status of the Scharnhorst, or the latest advances in German jet propulsion research. To them, a letter about a small German garrison's routine was tactical noise, irrelevant in the face of ultra-intercepts. On the other was the Air Ministry, perpetually demanding detailed maps of anti-aircraft batteries, flak, and factory vulnerability, critical data measured in the loss rate of their expensive four-engine aircraft. They saw the letter as a potential fragment of a much larger, actionable intelligence picture, yet they remained skeptical of its provenance. Finally, there was the SOE, whose mandate was action, sabotage, and the support of the resistance. They viewed the letter with a mixture of hope and utter dread. The dread was technical and existential. The SOE's operations in the area, codenamed the Circus Network, were already compromised. Their primary communications specialist, codenamed Hector, had not made contact in 3 weeks. The SOE was convinced that the Germans had captured the network's B2 wireless set and, worse, the operator's coded keys, a technical disaster that could feed the Germans months of false intelligence. The SOE's fear was simple. If Marie's letter contained genuine, detailed intelligence about German forces, it meant she had access to the same local sources as the Circus Network. And if the letter's details were accurate, it validated the network's existence right when the Funkabwehr were closing in. The bureaucratic challenge became a technical one. Was the information in the letter already known, or was it new data that could not be risked, but was too dangerous to ignore? The technical analysis focused on the details provided, the unloading of rail wagons at 0300 hours, and the specific mention of a new type of searchlight on the hill. Intelligence specialists, utilizing the nascent science of photographic reconnaissance analysis, comparing Marie's description to the latest low-altitude mosquito runs, were able to partially corroborate the movements. The 0300 hours unloading was confirmed to be high-explosive ordnance, designated for the new searchlight battery position. The searchlight itself was the German Wildsau system, an early, powerful parabolic reflector designed to blind night bombers after they evaded the initial Würzburg radar detection. This was cutting-edge anti-air technology, and Marie, an ordinary woman, had provided the coordinates. This corroboration swung the bureaucratic decision. The information was too valuable to discard, but the channel, an untraceable, non-secure letter sent to a randomly selected private, was an intelligence nightmare. It created a massive strategic vulnerability. If a civilian could obtain and transmit this level of detail via General Post, the entire security protocol of the French resistance was fatally flawed. The technological sophistication of the SOE, the microdots, the invisible inks, the cipher pads, had been bypassed by human desperation. The question was no longer what the letter contained, but how to verify it without alerting the German counterintelligence, who would certainly be watching the area for increased radio traffic or air activity. They had a window of opportunity, a technical gap they had to exploit. The only way to truly verify the information was to send an agent in, a risky move that could confirm the existence of a compromised network. The irony deepened. The very agency that prided itself on technical control and secure communication now had to rely on a civilian's mistake to perform a critical extraction. They needed to find the woman, but they could not signal the network that they were coming, nor could they use the established communications. The letter had exposed the gap between the grand strategic war fought by machines and the localized, gritty war fought by people. The decision was made. A single, highly specialized SOE agent would be sent in, equipped with only the most essential technology, operating outside the established protocol, his mission driven by the chaotic information contained in a mother's desperate appeal. The decision to deploy a specialized SOE agent, codenamed Le Faucon, the Falcon, was a stark acknowledgement of the letter's significance and the failure of existing protocols. Le Faucon was not a demolition expert. He was a master of evasion and a technical communications analyst, trained specifically to assess the integrity of compromised radio networks. His equipment was a marvel of miniaturization. A single-channel, crystal-controlled AS-3 transceiver. A highly compact set capable of only fixed-frequency transmissions, but immensely difficult for the Funkabwehr to detect if the transmission window was kept under 5 seconds. He carried a disposable one-time pad cipher key, designed to be destroyed after the first 2 messages, limiting exposure. His primary objective was to find Marie Dupont and verify the source of her information without activating the possibly compromised Circus Network's wireless set. The insertion method itself was a high-risk strategic deployment. It would not be a standard supply drop. This required a moon drop, a precise, high-altitude parachute jump during a period of minimal lunar illumination, ensuring the aircraft's presence was a complete ghost. The aircraft chosen was a modified Lockheed Hudson, a twin-engine light bomber pressed into transport service. The Hudson, flying at a cruise altitude of 18,000 feet until the French coast, then descended rapidly to 500 feet, was less detectable by the German Freya early warning radar systems than the massive Halifax bombers. The pilots relied entirely on dead reckoning and the faint flickering light signals from the ground, coordinated only by time. The technical challenge was immense, a small twin-engine aircraft, flying under the radar at night, navigating entirely by stopwatch and map, hoping to spot a pre-agreed set of 3 flashlights forming an inverted L. Le Faucon's landing zone was a desolate field near the town of Saint-Firmin-sur-Loire, approximately 15 kilometers from Marie's documented location, close enough for a multi-day infiltration, far enough to avoid local German patrols. The night was chosen for its optimal low light coefficient, a technical metric used by the RAF's Moon Planning Division. He carried minimal supplies, 3 days' rations, a silenced well-rod pistol, a specialized quiet weapon favored by SOE agents for its low muzzle velocity, and, ironically, a detailed map of the local postal delivery routes, cross-referenced with German patrol paths. The official SOE map now being dictated by the flow of civilian mail. The drop itself was a moment of supreme physical and psychological terror. Ejecting from the fuselage's belly hatch into the absolute void, Le Faucon was instantly engulfed by the cold air and the deafening roar of the Hudson's engines. His parachute canopy, camouflaged black, deployed with a violent snap. He descended at a speed of approximately 18 feet per second, landing silently in a dense hedgerow. The first strategic imperative was the disposal of the parachute and the container, both heavy linen and metal objects that, if discovered, would immediately trigger a large-scale German sweep. Meanwhile, the Funkabwehr was not idle. Having detected a recent, unusual spike in low-power, non-directional radio transmissions emanating from the general region of Le Creusot, not related to Marie's letter, but a separate compromised network activity, they had increased their counter-surveillance. Massive listening posts in Paris and Dijon were continuously sweeping the entire very high-frequency VHF spectrum, hoping to catch the telltale signs of an SOE transmission. The German technology was patient. They didn't need to intercept the message. They just needed to locate the Doppler shift in the signal, the subtle change in frequency caused by the operator's movement or the wind, to pinpoint the general area. Le Faucon's infiltration was therefore a race against the triangulation algorithms of the enemy. He spent the next 48 hours moving exclusively by night, hiding in the vast, dense French forests, relying on the minimal technology of his map and compass, navigating the treacherous interface between the occupied world and the hidden resistance network. Every step was calculated. Every contact was a potential betrayal. The irony remained stark. A professional spy, trained in the most advanced deception techniques, was risking his life to follow up on a woman's accidental appeal, a flaw in the system that had now become the system's most critical data point. The simple paper letter, a relic of a pre-war world, had unexpectedly become the master key to a highly sophisticated technological theater of war. Le Faucon's journey to the town of Le Creusot brought him into contact with the fragile remnants of the circus network. What he found was evidence of a strategic paralysis. The local resistance leader, Georges, a man hardened by years of dodging the Gestapo, was operating under the technical assumption that his main wireless set, the B2, was compromised. He had ceased all communication, effectively severing the network's technological link to London. This silence, while protecting the agents, had also blocked the flow of vital intelligence regarding the status of the Schneider works and German defenses, the very information Marie Dupont had stumbled upon. The technical problem was rooted in the equipment itself. The standard SOE B2 radio sets were notoriously unreliable and technically complex, requiring specialized knowledge to operate. More critically, each set used a unique, preset crystal for transmission frequency. If the Germans captured the set and the crystal, they could use the specific frequency to send dummy messages, or, more sinisterly, utilize the captured equipment as a technological lure, a beacon to draw in unsuspecting airdropped agents or supplies. Georges' decision to go silent was a defensive necessity. Le Faucon's immediate priority was to confirm the B2 set's integrity. He and Georges managed to retrieve the set from its hiding place, a hollowed-out tombstone in an old, abandoned cemetery. Under the cover of heavy midnight fog, Le Faucon performed a rapid, technical inspection. Using a specialized multimeter and frequency analyzer carried in his kit, equipment normally reserved for SOE HQ technicians, he discovered a critical flaw. The main power capacitor was subtly damaged, a common issue caused by fluctuations in the local grid power, but more importantly, the tiny mica insulator in the crystal socket was cracked. This damage would cause the frequency to drift slightly over the duration of the transmission, a subtle but recognizable signature that the highly tuned German listening stations would instantly flag as a set about to be compromised or already being operated under duress. The set was a technological liability. The strategic dilemma was now acute. Marie's letter had provided high-grade intelligence, but the only secure way to transmit it was with Le Faucon's AS the third set, which was intended only for emergency exfiltration signals, not for relaying operational data. Using the AS the 3 to send the data would compromise the agent's safe egress channel. The technological limitations had become a tactical cage. Le Faucon then turned his attention to Marie Dupont herself. He needed to verify the accuracy of her claims, especially the detail about the new searchlight. Meeting her in a tiny disused bakery, the exchange was a collision of two worlds. The highly disciplined, technically minded SOE agent and the terrified civilian mother. Marie, thinking she had written to a soldier, was shocked to see a man carrying a pistol and speaking in flawless but clipped French. She confirmed every detail, sketching the route of the German supply train on a flour-dusted countertop. Her information wasn't derived from a resistance cell. It was the product of acute civilian observation, the kind of unnoticed intelligence that the German occupiers overlooked because they focused on high-tech counter-espionage. Marie simply knew the routine of the O300 train because it woke her infant child every night. The verification process was completed when Le Faucon, utilizing his skills as a reconnaissance expert, scaled the factory wall. What he found confirmed Marie's detailed claim. A pair of massive experimental Flak 37 anti-aircraft cannons were being deployed near the railway bridge, covered by the powerful Wild Sow searchlights she had described. The guns were positioned not for general defense, but specifically to create a deadly kill zone for low-flying Mosquito reconnaissance aircraft. Marie's observation had pinpointed a future strategic vulnerability, a classic case of intelligence fusion where civilian observation illuminated a technological threat. The challenge now escalated from technical diagnosis to strategic action. Le Faucon had the intelligence, but he was trapped. He could send the critical Flak coordinates to London, but he would expose his only secure exit route. If he waited for the compromised B2 network to be fixed, the German guns would be fully operational. The bureaucratic bomb of Chapter 2 had exploded, leaving the fate of an upcoming Allied raid entirely dependent on a split-second technological decision by one man in the field. Le Faucon's solution to the transmission dilemma was a calculated, technically audacious gamble, forcing a direct confrontation with the Funkabwehr's capabilities. He realized the risk of using his AS-3 was too high, and the Circus network's B2 was too compromised. The alternative lay in a technology often overlooked by the high-stakes world of radio espionage: microphotography. The SOE had developed a sophisticated yet simple system for creating microdots. This involved photographing an entire sheet of coded text, shrinking the image down to the size of a full stop, period, and concealing it within an innocuous letter or parcel. Le Faucon carried a miniature camera, no larger than a cigarette lighter, and a tiny developing kit, designed to process the dot onto a small square of film. The challenge was logistics: how to get the physical letter out of occupied territory and back to the British censors, who could recognize the hidden dot. His target became the German field post office, Feldpost. Le Faucon knew that while the international mail was heavily scrutinized, the internal German military mail system, focused on speed and morale, was generally less obsessed with finding civilian resistance than with preventing military breaches. He needed a medium, an unwitting, reliable courier who would use the Feldpost to carry the microdot. The chosen courier was a young German military clerk, Franz Müller, known to frequent a small local tavern. Müller regularly sent parcels of local wine and tobacco back to his family in Berlin. Le Faucon, utilizing a local resistance contact skilled in forgery, managed to obtain a highly accurate counterfeit Feldpost stamp and franking mark, essential to ensure the parcel followed the correct fast-track military route. The payload was critical. Le Faucon did not just write the coordinates. He created a full intelligence report, a detailed map of the Flak 37 deployment area, the precise firing arcs, the confirmed Wild Sow searchlight location, and a full analysis of the compromised B2 radio set, all condensed into approximately 500 characters of high-density text. This was then photographed, shrunk into a microdot, and carefully placed inside the spine of a newly issued German stamp on Müller's parcel, a location that would only be found if the stamp were meticulously removed and viewed under high magnification. The use of the microdot was a calculated technological counter-move. It entirely avoided the Germans' massive investment in wireless direction finding, the goniometers, and Funkabwehr. Instead, it relied on exploiting the Germans' own logistical network and the sheer volume of their mail processing. The speed of the delivery, from Le Creusot to Berlin, then to a neutral country processing point, like Switzerland or Spain, and finally back to London, was still measured in days, not minutes. But unlike a radio signal, the microdot, once launched, was immune to enemy triangulation or jamming. This high-stakes courier service was the strategic climax of the human interest element. The intelligence gleaned from Marie's desperate, accidental letter, verified by Le Faucon's dangerous reconnaissance, was now entrusted to a technologically invisible carrier. The irony was palpable. The most advanced, critical military intelligence was riding on a postage stamp, courtesy of a homesick German private. While the parcel began its long, circuitous route, Le Faucon and the Circus network had to prepare for the inevitable. The intelligence suggested a major Allied bombing raid was imminent against the Schneider works. The Flak 37s were being installed for a reason. They had bought time, but the Funkabwehr was closing in on the general area. Le Faucon's decision to use the microdot meant he had saved his communications channel, but he had increased the network's immediate physical risk. The agents were now alone, cut off from immediate aid, waiting for a raid they could only influence, but not stop, their fate sealed by a small, nearly invisible dot of film. The tension was now a physical presence in Le Creusot. Le Faucon and Georges knew they had a maximum of 72 hours before the Flak 37 battery would be fully operational, and the German counterintelligence, operating on their own timetable of technical sweeps, would make their inevitable move against the known resistance hot zone. The strategic clock was ticking down to zero. The primary target was the Schneider Works, a sprawling industrial complex covering hundreds of acres, producing heavy armaments, railway locomotives, and, most crucially, massive gun barrels for the German war machine. Its vast scale was a testament to the industrial power that needed to be neutralized. Allied intelligence estimated that the factory was consuming 2,500 tons of coal per day and employed over 15,000 workers. The factory's resilience to prior bombing raids was due to its decentralized shed construction, a deliberate design to mitigate bomb blast, and the constant presence of heavy smoke that obscured it from high-altitude visual targeting. The Allied plan, once the microdot was confirmed, was devastatingly precise. The intelligence from Le Faucon dictated a low-altitude, fast attack by de Havilland Mosquito light bombers, utilizing a newly developed skip bombing technique. Skip bombing required the pilot to drop delayed fuse high-explosive bombs, specifically the 500 lbgp bomb, from near ground level, causing the bombs to skip across the factory floor and detonate inside the main assembly halls, maximizing structural damage. This tactic, however, put the aircraft directly into the firing range of the Flak 37s, the very guns Marie had identified. The risk was enormous. The Mosquito, flying at 300 knots, approximately 345 mm at under 50 feet, had no margin for error. In the tavern, Le Faucon and Georges made their final tactical decision. Since they could not use the radio and could not physically destroy the Flak 37 battery, it was heavily fortified with steel and concrete, they had to rely on a technical diversion that played into the German mindset. Their target, the German communications landlines connecting the searchlight control post to the battery firing command bunker. German doctrine, focused on redundancy, relied on both radio and wired communications. By severing the landlines, they would force the Flak battery to operate solely on radio command, a less stable, more delay-prone method. The technological aspect of the sabotage was a lesson in low-tech ingenuity, using a simple fuse wire and a low-yield plastic explosive charge, PE2, disguised as a lump of coal. The charge was planted deep within the junction box of the main communications cable, which ran through an innocuous-looking roadside trench. The PE2 was armed with a non-metallic chemical delayed action pencil fuse, allowing a 6-hour delay, just enough time for the saboteurs to be kilometers away and for the German patrols to conclude the area was secure. The precise timing of the explosion was set to coincide with the estimated time of the Mosquito strike. As they planted the charge, the sounds of the occupation were suddenly amplified. A German Volkswagen Kübelwagen, carrying a detachment of the Funkabwehr, its roof bristling with a primitive movable antenna array, cruised slowly down the road, its occupants scanning the skyline not for aircraft, but for the invisible pipsqueak of a radio signal. Le Faucon and Georges froze in the shadow of a stone wall, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the German engine's low rumble. The Germans' advanced technical hunting gear was less than 50 meters away. The irony was excruciating. The Funkabwehr were hunting a ghost signal, completely unaware that the only actionable intelligence was currently a highly volatile lump of explosive hidden under their tires. The Kübelwagen passed. The PE2 charge lay dormant. Le Faucon and Georges retreated to their safe house, the silence broken only by the distant rhythmic clang of the steelworks, the sound of the very industrial power they were about to attack. All they could do now was wait for the confirmation that the microdot had reached London, the coordinates had been briefed to the Mosquito pilots, and the chemical fuse had activated, cutting the wire precisely when the first planes crossed the coast. The fate of the entire operation and Marie Dupont's safety hung on the convergence of a technological failure, the compromised B2, a desperate human mistake, the letter, and a precise low-tech act of sabotage. The day of the raid arrived shrouded in a dense, unnatural fog, a gift from the local weather patterns, complicating the German defense, but also increasing the inherent technical risk for the low-flying Mosquito pilots. The Allied operation, codenamed Operation Vesuvius, involved a highly specialized 8-aircraft formation. The aircraft, the Mosquito FB Mk6, was a masterpiece of speed and wood construction, capable of outpacing any contemporary German fighter at low altitude, a strategic advantage measured in mere seconds of reaction time. Hours before the raid, in the early hours of the morning, the chemical pencil in the PE-2 charge reached its final stage. A small, silent detonation occurred deep within the junction box, instantaneously severing the multi-core landline cable. The German Flak 37 battery command post instantly lost its wired link to the searchlight and anti-aircraft coordinators. This forced them to switch to their backup radio command channel, a system notoriously susceptible to minor interference and, critically, slower to react. Le Faucon's low-tech gambit had created a vital technical delay in the German response mechanism. The Mosquitoes crossed the coast at 04:15, flying at wave-top height. Their navigation was guided by the GH system, an early electronic hyperbolic navigation aid, providing a more precise fix than traditional radar. Their target was a pinpoint, and the coordinates provided by the microdot, the exact location of the Flak 37 emplacements, were now loaded into every bombardier's map. The planes flew so low that the pilots could see the condensation trails of their own engines reflected on the wet French fields. As the squadron approached Le Creusot, the German radar system, specifically the long-range Freya, registered the rapid, low-altitude approach. The sirens screamed, and the German defenses reacted with brutal speed. The German Flak command, however, was in chaos. They were attempting to coordinate the searchlights and guns via the now unstable radio link. The massive Wild-Sau searchlights, designed to illuminate the target, swung wildly, often pointing at the sky rather than the horizon, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. A direct result of Le Faucon's landline sabotage. The Mosquito pilots executed the attack with chilling precision. They came in at under 100 feet. The lead aircraft, guided by the microdot intelligence, ignored the main factory building initially and focused their 20mm cannon fire directly on the Flak 37 emplacements. The concentrated blast of high-explosive shells from the Mosquito's nose-mounted armament neutralized the uncoordinated gun crews before they could zero their sights. The flak fire that did come up was wild, erratic, and aimed primarily at the ghost shapes of the searchlight beams. Then came the skip bombing run. The Mosquitoes dropped their 500 LEB bombs, set with a 10-second delay fuse, at a velocity of over 300 knots. The bombs skipped across the ground like stones on water, piercing the corrugated iron roofs of the main assembly halls before detonating deep within the structure. The resulting series of massive internal explosions ripped the heart out of the Schneider works. The entire industrial district became a pillar of fire and smoke. From their hiding place on a nearby ridge, Le Faucon and Georges watched the apocalyptic scene unfold. The sound was deafening, the smell of burning oil and cordite thick in the air. The mission was a resounding success, a surgical strike made possible by the intersection of high-speed air technology and a desperate civilian's observation. In the aftermath, Le Faucon activated his AS-3 transceiver. The time for caution was over. He sent a single coded burst message to London, less than 3 seconds of transmission, confirming the success of Operation Vesuvius and, more importantly, requesting immediate exfiltration for himself, Georges, and, crucially, Marie Dupont. The risk was massive, as the Funkabwehr would instantly register the transmission. But the strategic gain, the destruction of the factory, justified the technical exposure. The mother's accidental letter had ultimately saved the entire operation. And now, it was London's turn to save her. The story of Le Faucon and the desperate mother is a pivotal example of how human resolve intersects with the cold precision of war technology. If you found this chapter intense, be sure to like this video, leave a comment about which WE technology fascinates you most, and subscribe. Our final chapter explores the dangerous escape and the legacy of this accidental cipher. The 3-second signal from Le Faucon was immediately picked up by the Funkabwehr. The German goniometer teams, already on high alert, triangulated the signal source to a small 5-square-kilometer area on the outskirts of Le Creusot. The reaction was swift and brutal. Within an hour, Gestapo and Wehrmacht rapid response units equipped with armored cars and tracking dogs had cordoned off the entire zone. The noose was tightening. The exfiltration plan was as minimalist as the insertion, a simple Lysander Stoll, short takeoff and landing aircraft. The Lysander, a high-wing monoplane designed for artillery observation and liaison, was the SOE's favored extraction vehicle due to its astonishing ability to land and take off from a 300-meter field. The pilot, Winnie, was an acknowledged master of low-light, high-stress landings. The rendezvous point was a secluded stretch of farmland, marked only by the 3 flashlights forming the inverted L, a signal as old as wartime aviation, yet still effective. Le Faucon, Georges, and Marie began their final, treacherous journey across the occupied countryside. Marie carried her infant child, the very child whose waking schedule had provided the critical intelligence. The irony was the constant soundtrack to their escape. The rhythmic sound of the German pursuit, the distant bark of dogs, the revving of engines, pushed them towards the rendezvous field. As they reached the field, the Lysander arrived, a mechanical ghost descending from the black sky. Winnie, the pilot, executed a perfect dead-stick approach, cutting the engine at 1,000 feet to maximize stealth. The landing was rough but successful. The engine, however, had to be immediately restarted, a high-risk procedure in the silent field. Just as Marie and her child were clambering into the cramped rear cockpit, a German patrol stumbled upon the field. The flashlights, meant as a beacon of salvation, had also served as a general guide for the German search teams. Le Faucon and Georges provided cover fire with their limited ammunition. The Sten guns Georges had acquired were technically crude, but devastatingly effective at close range. The noise was shattering, breaking the silence of the night and confirming the position of the aircraft. Winnie, without waiting for Le Faucon, slammed the throttle forward. The Lysander's powerful radial engine roared to life. Georges, realizing the aircraft could only carry 3 passengers plus the pilot and Marie and her child were the priority, shoved Le Faucon onto the wing. The plane began its impossibly short takeoff roll, leaving Georges to face the German patrol alone, firing rapidly to distract the enemy from the plane's ascent. Georges' sacrifice, a final act of strategic prioritization, was the ultimate price of the accidental cipher. The Lysander cleared the hedgerow by mere feet, climbing steeply away from the flashes of German gunfire, disappearing over the horizon towards the Channel. Marie Dupont, the desperate mother who had sent a letter by mistake, was safely aboard, her accidental courage having saved an entire Allied air operation. The legacy. The intelligence derived from Marie's letter and Le Faucon's verification became a landmark case study in wartime intelligence fusion. The successful raid on the Schneider Works, which disabled the factory's heavy armament production for over 4 months, was directly attributed to the precise location of the Flak 37 batteries. It proved that the rigid, technologically dependent German security doctrine could be circumvented by the unpredictable variable of human observation and the exploitation of the enemy's own bureaucratic systems. The story of the accidental cipher is not just about a letter. It is about the vast, complex, and often overlooked technological and human infrastructure required to wage a shadow war. It is a story of how the most advanced war technology, the Lysander, the Mosquito, the Funkabwehr's goniometers, was ultimately dictated by the most basic human components: a mother's desperation, a spy's ingenuity, and a resistance fighter's final act of defiance. The great strategic war was built on the millions of small, chaotic, and fiercely human acts of courage. The true power of the Allied war machine was not just its industrial scale, but its capacity to integrate the smallest, most desperate piece of human intelligence into the grand strategic plan. We hope you have enjoyed this deep dive into the technology, strategy, and human drama of the Secret War. If you want to learn more about the incredible machines and the brave individuals of WW2, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for our next historical investigation.